Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Happily Never After show. I'm your host, Kate Mollison, and this week we're talking about grief in your physical body. We're talking about how grief can hold you back and how you can move forward with it. So this week I have a very dear friend and co-collaborator and incredible grief expert. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on this, Kate. I just love to talk to you about, grief and all the different aspects that grief has to bring. I know that may sound weird to love to talk about grief,
not to me. Yeah.
I know, and probably not to most of your audience as well. So, but in the general public, and I always think that should be less of the case. People should be more comfortable and have more transparent conversations about grief itself, because we're all going to go through it at some point. And it's good to be open about it.
Yeah, talking about death doesn't have to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. So let me give you let me give your audience a little bit about my history and my background. So my name is Jason Wendroff Ranwicki. I'm a somatic grief therapist. I lost my sister Lauren in a car accident in 1998. Back then, there were so few resources on how to deal with grief, especially sibling loss, because it was definitely a marginalized loss. There are some other losses get more kind of press than sibling loss. So there was really nothing. I looked for books. I couldn't find them. There weren't very many sibling support groups. Therapy was even very limited to, psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy. Those were like the two mainstream back then. It was either that or like going to your church or temple or religious facility. And I was like, none of those really seemed to work for me. I was like, I really didn't resonate with any of those modalities. But the one thing that really did resonate with me was, like, I just had started practicing yoga, and I was getting into not just the breathing, but the physical practice. And then I started to make some lifestyle changes out of my physical yoga practice. I became mostly vegetarian, almost vegan for a while. Now I've kind of have shifted sort of back to pescatarian, but it made such a huge difference when I started to take care of my physical body. It made such a huge difference on how I felt emotionally and my thought process. So it made me realize, like, there's really something to this. Like, there's really something to how taking care of your body can help your brain and your heart. So it was the one huge thing that really allowed me to start to manage my grief in a more effective, more constructive way, rather than letting it destroy me from the inside.
There was a shift of like almost an alchemization where you took what was happening and used it for self-improvement, that awareness. Like, once you know, you can't unknow, right?
Right, 100%. And the thing too is that there was nobody talking about it, right? Like, they're talking about mental health, they're talking about emotional health, like in grief, but not the physical health component. And when I began to realize, because I shut down for a good couple of years because I didn't even realize I was supposed to be dealing with my own grief. I just like buried it deep inside. And as my life was starting to sort of unravel. I was like, wait, there's something like what's going on here? And I realized that part of that was sort of my unexpressed grief that was just
Mhm.
driving into my body. I was, I was overweight. I was not feeling well. I was not athletic. Not that I was ever athletic to begin with, but then as I got my body healthier, I'm probably more athletic now than at any other point in my life.
Same, totally the
Right,
same. And as a
right.
direct result of loss and grief and that need to
100.
take care of your body in a different way and move grief through those physical manifestations. So
Correct.
many
And
people miss that, like, oh, I have headaches, or oh, I'm an insomniac, or oh, my stomach is upset. Like nervous belly is a real thing, and it's probably connected to emotional going ons. And so it's
yep.
really interesting when you talk about your awareness and how that sphere just kind of gained a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And then you went, boom, you have to do
Yeah.
something about it.
Oh, 100%. And the other thing that is really quite interesting is sometimes the physical ailments that people feel are directly related to whatever their loss. Like, so I'm working with a woman who lost her sister, and she had trouble breathing, and the sister had trouble breathing, and the physicality is showing up like in her lungs and in her
The
breath. You know,
psychosomatic manifestation of this weight of this trauma.
correct. And it's like kind of mirroring what the loss, like the person that we lost sort of went through. So it's like an identification and then like an internalization of that, so that when it
Wow.
shows up in the body, like lower back issues, you were saying, like sleeplessness and other kinds of ailments are usually connected to the loss in some way.
Hmm. That's fascinating. I
Yeah.
don't think I would have made that connection. And to touch on a point that you had mentioned earlier, you had lost your sister, and I'm so incredibly sorry for that loss. But generally my listeners are more widow or spouse loss, right? And
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we understand it doesn't matter the proximity, the relationship, right? So you can have a
Right.
sibling loss and still relate to someone who's been widowed because you unilaterally understand the experience of grief.
Yeah.
And while it's apples to oranges, they live in the same produce department. You
Yeah.
said sometimes grief gets more awareness. So I love that you're normalizing talking about sibling loss, not just loss in general. And the time that's passed, people would say, like, even for me, 4 years, this
Yeah.
year is 4 years since I've lost Craig, and people go, "You're still talking about it." I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of like a forever thing. Like,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
love that you just continue to talk about your sister and you carry that mission forward.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a little bit of marginalization from a gender perspective where men are told to keep their emotions in, and then it was like the time that we lived in, the 90s, the 2000s,
Yeah.
men and mental health wasn't really talked about. So you've got a lot of factors working against you in your grief journey. And how did you overcome all of that?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you ask that question kind of sort of in this space and time, because one of the things that I'm actually working on in my own personal development is my masculinity, but not in an immature way, not in
Mm,
a like, let's, do sports and that kind of stuff. But in a
fear
very
and
like
boobs.
right, exactly, TNA kind of way, right? No, it's real, because
Love
what
that
I'm
you
realizing.
said that.
But what I'm realizing about myself is, a lot of times I've learned to be a man from women. And so
Mm,
there's this actual fear of, if we actually express the big emotions that we have, we have to keep them inside because other people are going to get like disturbed by it, or it's going to seem aggressive, or, so I'm even working on that still right now within myself, is how do I get in touch with the mature masculine part of myself
the
that's
healed
emotionally,
masculine.
yeah,
We
yeah,
love
that's
this.
emotionally available, that can express themselves fully,
Mm.
and make sure that it's not like causing destruction in its wake.
Yeah, inflicting trauma. Well, I think, and to that point, it comes down to not just the awareness of what the emotion is and the capacity to articulate it, but it's what you do with it after that, right? Like now you
One,
have this awareness and you can either sit in it and let it kind of destroy you or drive you, or you can alchemize it a little bit. And
right.
I find the
Well,
same to be true with with grief and that grief
Yep.
experience.
Yeah, I like to language a little bit differently. Like I feel that like we think that emotions come up and there's some good emotions and there are some bad emotions, but emotions are just emotions. They come up, they actually have a lot of physiology that goes along with it, chemical changes in the body. But the question is what do we do with it? And do we use them, constructively in order to create and build,
Mm,
or do we use them destructively to break down? And so when we can look at our own individual patterns of, oh, right, I'm like criticizing myself, I'm beating myself up, that I'm taking that guilt or sadness or anger and I'm turning it inward in the body and I'm
mm,
destroying myself with it versus wait, let's take that same emotion or that same feeling and let's use it in a constructive way. So rather, right, like, so then we can use it to build things and create things.
yeah. And we kind of get out of our own way in that way because the destructiveness of those emotions not only prohibit us mentally from participating, but physically, right? So a lot
Yeah.
of the work that you do is about moving these emotions and physiological responses or finding the connection maybe between
Yeah.
the emotion and the physiological responses. How do
Well,
you
and
help clients work through their grief?
right. So I do it in two separate ways. And it's a great that we're talking, right? Because we usually set like a lot of people separate the physical from the mental and emotional, but you really have to integrate them together.
Yeah.
So I call it, I have like a sort of a two-prong approach. I work from the body up. And so
Mm,
when I say somatic, I just mean the body. And that goes not just for like movement, because there's a big push right now where say, oh, somatic, therapy, and they only focus on the movement component to it. But there's so much more to the body, right? There's the health, there's getting the right supplementation, there is the movement part, there's sleep. People don't put enough stress on sleep. There actually research is showing that having good quality sleep is almost more important, if not more important, than diet and exercise.
wow.
Because it's your body's ability to heal itself. It's
Right.
to
It's your
regulate
reset
itself,
time.
right? It's your total reset time. So if you're not getting good quality sleep, I mean, that would be like definitely a good place to start. Where how do we start to get good sleep hygiene? And there's many things that you can do to get good sleep hygiene to encourage the body to get better quality rest. And
And
one of
that's
I
so critical in grief too, right? Is like
oh,
we tend to find
100%.
our sleep disrupted, but that's the thing we need most
Correct.
in
And
that time. Is so how do we, like you said, have good sleep hygiene or good sleep practices and put those frameworks in place before there's a traumatic experience or a loss where it's
right.
not so much of an uphill battle afterwards. I found that
Yeah.
to be true for me, critical lifetime insomniac, and then
Mm.
um to have the capacity for sleep get better, I wouldn't have even thought that a potential.
Well, and it's amazing how when that happens, like so many other things fall into place, right? Like when you're giving your time to rest, when your body then just heals itself. And so even if you're eating fully like organic, whole grain, really clean diet, if you're not sleeping well, then your body can't metabolize all that stuff, right? When your cortisol levels drop and your digestive health is in optimal condition, then all of that stuff then can add to your vitality.
Totally. So it's very much like a holistic approach, right? Like somatic and
Correct.
holistic could almost be synonyms with one another, where it's not just yoga, it's not just how they sleep, it's not just
Yep.
how they eat, but what they eat and where they're getting their nutrients. It's, I liken it
Yep.
to a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm a big
Yeah.
Maslow nerd, right? And it's about securing all of the pieces of
Yep.
your existence in
Yep.
order to become self-actualized or in order to navigate grief or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yep.
So when you're working with clients in this two-prong approach,
Well, let
you're
me talk
yeah,
about the second prong, right? So we got the body, right? Like the foundation of the body, right? That's and then I go body up, right? So when your body is healthy, you're going to be able to think more clearly, you're going to be able to manage your emotions more effectively. But then the second prong is working from the mind down, which is also important as well. Because when we think, our thoughts are vibrations, and the way we think creates vibrations that affect the cells of the body. And they're actually showing that negative thinking creates negative impact on cellular health. So if you have thoughts that keep cycling and cycling and cycling, and they're kind of in that negative space, then you're creating negativity in the cells of your body, and then they respond to that. So looking at the way you think is really important, just as much as keeping the health of the body, because we all have a body image. How do we think about our body? How do we think about life? And how can we change and shift that so that this way we look at the big picture and not just like isolate our grief, right? Like we want to work on the grief, but in relationship to everything else that's going on in your life.
Yeah. I love that you just attack it from a big picture 10,000-foot view approach, right? Where a lot of people in grief don't have the capacity to do that. And my question to you is, when you're using this two-prong approach for people, are you finding any type of pushback on one side of the approach or the other, or are you finding that they're able to integrate a big picture philosophy relatively easily?
Everyone creates their own patterns, right? Like, so some people push back on like, oh, I'm not going to take supplements, or, oh, I'm not going to, exercise or do that kind of thing. I do get some pushback for sure, but in the pushback, there's so much information to be learned in the pushback, right?
Yeah.
Like and I give homework to my clients all the time, and sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. But when they don't, we look at, okay, why didn't you do it? Like, what is the pushback? And I don't care if they do it or not, but there's so much information in that resistance, because that's where kind of looking at some of your old past patterns come into play. Like where did this pattern come from, or what is the resistance, so that when you start to give a name to the resistance, it loses its power.
Mm. And do you find that the type of somatic work that you're doing is better in a large group setting, a small group setting, a one-on-one? I'm sure you do all of it, but if people are interested in starting to dabble in this and learn more about it, this is
Right.
something that could be done in a group setting.
Correct. Right now, I love working one-on-one with people. So that's sort of, that's what I'm doing right now. But in November, I'm going to be doing like a group program to get through the holidays. I kind of got this idea literally like yesterday. I'm like, oh, we haven't really in my programs, people haven't started talking about the holidays yet. So I'm thinking that it's going to build up because they're
Now's
coming
the
up.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm going to actually start a 6-week group program starting in November to kind of bridge through the holidays.
I love that. So I do a holiday workshop in November as well. And so as soon as you have that information ready, I will share it out at my workshop for you.
I will
So that
absolutely.
Seasons Grievings workshop will be November 7th for me, for
Yep.
anyone interested. But
Right.
I
And
love
I,
that
and
you're
I,
doing that long overarching support through the holidays, because I feel like it's so important that we go in with a game plan, because
yeah,
then
oh,
you
what,
fall victim to those maladaptive things, over drinking, eating too many
yep.
sugar cookies, either oversleeping or undersleeping because you stayed up late. Like, it tis the season.
Yep.
Overstaying your emotional bandwidth at a family party, and then having to deal with all those questions, or not having a good toolkit. So I
Yep.
love that you just provide that continued support.
Well, and in the end of October, the last weekend of October, we're also running a group juice cleanse. My wife and I are big fans of doing juice cleanses every six
Mm.
months just to completely reset the digestive system, reset the psychological reasons why we eat. So we're going to be starting that. It's anywhere from 3 to 5 days. You choose. It's kind of a DIY, but we're going to do it in a group setting, so that this way we have created a full program with juices and all of the things that you'll need to do a juice fast.
I love that. And so you support people through the nutritional element, you support them through the movement because you do yoga, you
Yep.
support them through that emotional, intellectual quotient. And you also support them through the supplements, if I understand correctly, right?
Correct.
You work with a company called
100.
doTERRA and you
Yep.
do
Yeah.
essential oils and stuff like that. So for the listeners who
Yes.
aren't familiar with, supplements and oils, what's the benefit of layering that piece into the grief recovery?
Gotcha. So there's a couple of things. So the company I work with is doTERRA. They're technically an essential oil company, but they really do a lot of great work with supplementation that infuse essential oils into their supplements because taking supplements is great, but if they're not bioavailable, then it's just expensive pee and poo,
Meaning
right?
that
Like
your body can't
your
absorb
body
them.
just can't absorb them. So so
Expensive
there's
pee. You're so funny.
but it's true. We're like literally flushing with many types of supplements, you're literally flushing your money down the toilet. Because if it's not utilizable by the body, then it's no good in grief specifically. Like if there were one supplement that for grief would be omegas because of what they do for your brain health and your emotional health. They're such
So
good
critical.
emotional and brain regulators. It's one of the things that like I cannot do without. So, if
Hmm.
there's like literally one supplement, like a great omega is definitely where I would focus, especially for the grief, because it really helps to get your brain healthy. It helps with focus. It helps with
Right.
emotional regulation.
Well, we all know the neurochemicals are like having a rave in your brain
Right.
after loss, right? You've got
Yeah.
the excess
Yep.
cortisol, you've got the hippocampus is like going
Like
crazy, your
on
emotional
fire.
receptors are firing. It is
Yep.
like being waterboarded with gasoline, I often say. And
Right.
so
Right.
having that just little bit of help to kind of clear
Yes.
some of the noise, or why wouldn't you want to make it easier on yourself if you
Yep.
didn't
Well,
have
and
to?
and I'll use my own example as far as how powerful it could be. Like I guess many years ago, I was teaching yoga, and I was just having these weird memory gaps of simple words. And like when you're teaching a class of 20, 25 people, right? You don't want to really be reaching for simple words. And I was like, this is really weird. Like I'm having these little memory gaps and I'm kind of young to be able to, and everyone's like, oh no, you're getting older. And I'm like, no, that's BS. Like that's not true. I mean, maybe it's normal, but it doesn't have to be,
Mm.
right? So I was like, what a lot of people accept as like standard operation of the vehicle, you don't have to take that, right? Like you don't have to,
Oh,
right? Like you don't have to take that. So I realized there's something I'm missing in my food intake. I started taking the doTERRA omegas, and those memory gaps just immediately kind of disappeared,
wow.
right? And so it just is an indicator of the modern uh, diet is that we're not getting enough, and it's almost not. Those omega 3s are almost non-existent in our modern day diets, and we need a omega 3 omega 6 rate good ratio, and most of us are not getting that.
Sure. And obviously, just again, for the listeners, I want to make sure that they're consulting with their physicians and their healthcare providers in order to get the appropriate information for what they should be taking and when they should be taking and if they
Yeah.
should be taking it. I always like to disclaimer ourselves. And,
Yeah.
it is my experience that I've had better brain focus and quality with supplements and omegas specifically as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
But always
And
consult with a physician before starting anything new as far as like trying your health and wellness. Just
and if
trust
you're
your gut.
even on medications, having a good foundation of health just helps those medications work more effectively.
And
So
in some
that this
cases
way
eliminates medications,
it can. I mean,
like
it
blood pressure
can.
medications and those types of things. Again,
Yeah,
consult with your physician, but
100%.
the baseline of health, this is a great natural way because these things exist in nature, exist in food. It's not,
Yeah.
additives and all that other stuff. But I always like to disclaim.
Yeah. No,
I love it.
100%.
Yeah, and so we've got lots of things going on, you and I, for those who don't
Yeah.
know you and are just joining us. We've worked together for a little bit, and that's why bringing you into the conversation around grief just felt so natural for me. You were a presenter at my
Yeah.
national conference. Talk to me about that experience in teaching some of the somatic grief, in that type of setting. How was that for you?
Oh, I absolutely love it because it gives people exposure to something that they're usually not used to. Even traditional therapists. I had a traditional therapist in my group and was just really like interested and really felt the difference after just moving his body and connecting with his emotions and in a
I
very,
love
very
that.
different way.
To get
And
like
I
live
also
feedback too from that in moment experience must have been really cool.
Oh, it's great. I love talking in front of people. I just did a keynote in New Orleans this summer,
Oh,
for the Compassionate Friends conference, and having 800 people in a room, move it like, and I got them moving. I like to create experiences even when I speak. So it's I love the live component of it. Sure, most of my work is done virtually, like all of my individual one-on-one work and group classes are all done virtually, but I love to get in front of people for sure.
it was so great because I popped into the session that you facilitated at the conference, and it was this like robust vocalization about moving, and you had us like chanting words, and it became almost like a drum circle, and everyone just like we were
Yeah.
looking at each other and all making this weird like eye contact because it felt super awkward and uncomfortable even for an extrovert like me, but then we're just still going with it and it gets louder and then we get excited and then afterwards we all just like started laughing. It was you wouldn't think that laughter would be the next step in that natural response for emotional processing, but it
Yeah.
created this like sense of community and co-commiseration and understanding. And then you're just like the adrenaline was going. It was super
Yeah.
cool.
I,
I hadn't had a lot of experience with somatic grief, healing. I've done yoga and I've done, therapy and I've done hypnotherapy and kind of married them together on my own, but to have someone
yeah.
facilitate it was so super cool. So
Well,
I
and
love,
laughter is one of the best ways of healing, right? Like that's why the expression laughter is the best medicine, because even if you pretend to laugh, right? Like you're activating the happy hormones in like the body
yeah,
and getting everything moving, and it's just a movement of energy. And some people that have been through the grief process have never laughed or don't laugh, and it's
or feel
really I
guilty laughing and
yeah.
stifle it.
Yeah, at the Compassionate Friends conference in the summer, I taught a whole thing on laughter,
I
right?
love
Like
that.
so where we forced, like, I had to think about 80 or 90 people in the room, and we're all just laughing and pretending to laugh, and then the pretending of laughing becomes real laughter, and it just
Wow.
shifts and changes, like it just shifts and changes your energy in a second. And that's the beauty of the somatic work, is that you don't need to take, oh, well, I'm feeling this way and I need to process. No,
Yep.
you can change the way you feel in a second.
Yeah, it really is kind of for those people who shy away from the big feelings because I don't know, it's a less direct way also, but
Yeah.
a more direct way, you don't have to logicize. And I think for me,
Yeah.
I get stuck in the I think I feel versus I
Right.
feel. Yeah, I tend to like
Right.
articulate my feelings and that isn't
Yeah.
helpful. Like, well, if I think about it, no, don't think, just feel.
Yeah, just
And
just,
so I
just feel it.
find that after doing somatic stuff and yoga stuff, and you tend to be a little bit more fluid in the language of the
Yeah.
emotions and you don't logicize it as much.
And I want to kind of bring that, like, because I want to address like your sort of widower audience. I think some forms of grief have a more physical component. They all have a physical component, but I think there are some forms of grief that have a little bit extra. A widow and widower grief
Mm,
is, I think, in that category, because you're like living with the person, you're side
like
by side,
physical
there,
relationship.
right. Even in yoga and Ayurveda, they say that when someone goes from a girlfriend or a boyfriend to a wife or a husband, the dynamic changes from relationship to physical body, right? Like, so if you're looking at that, so
Yeah.
it would make sense that being I think also losing a twin, and also that's why losing a child have very, like, even added physical components, because there's actual.
Biophysiology connection there that doesn't
Correct.
necessarily exist as intensely. I don't want to say doesn't
Right.
exist, but doesn't exist
Right.
as intensely.
And that's
That's
that also
fascinating.
could. Right, and that could also be why pet loss sometimes kind of can feel overwhelming
Oh,
too, right? Because the pets are in your space, they're with you, you're feeding them, you're taking care of
it's
them.
that
They're
proximity.
Yeah, because, like, I know, I mean, losing my sister, we didn't live together for a while before she passed. So there wasn't that like day-to-day
Mm,
physical proximity to her. And even though it was challenging for sure,
yeah.
it's a
But
lifelong thing.
navigating that
But
like day-to-day absence, that eruption of the
right,
person in your
right,
life.
right, because you get in being with someone day to day, you get into physical habits with them. Oh, I cook him breakfast. He cooks me breakfast, or
It's all
this and that.
relationship,
It's
like
relational,
transactions,
right?
essentially.
Yeah, and they're like they're habitual, right? Like they become
Yeah.
everyday things, right? And so once we have those everyday things, then it's like we're grounded in habit. And once it's habitual, then it takes a little bit longer to unwind those habits.
Sure. Well, much to your point, so, even the side of the bed that you sleep on, right? Like I always slept on the right side of the bed. And then after
Right.
Craig passed away, the thought of his side of the bed remaining empty was so like gut wrenching that it unraveled me. And so I started sleeping on his side of the bed because it was easier to rationalize my side's empty, his side
Right.
isn't. And even to this day, so now just I sleep on the left side of the bed now. I'm in a new
Yep.
relationship. I live in a new house and going into
Yep.
the like, nope, my side of the bed is the left side of the bed. And it's just
Right.
that weird, you have to find those ways to move through those relationship connectors. And
Yep.
doing somatic work is huge in being able to like
100.
wrap your brain around this concept that like this person just doesn't exist anymore. They were
Right.
there
And it's
every
and
day,
it's
all day, and now poof, they don't exist. It is a mind F. And
Yep.
to do the somatic work is a key in moving through some of that like physical pain that you're having.
Well, right, because it's directly right into your nervous system, and doing the somatic work changes like those neural pathways, and it helps to regulate your nervous system.
I love it. So, speaking of our relationship and how we've
Yeah.
partnered, we've got some pretty exciting things coming up together. Um,
Yep.
let's tell the listeners a little bit about our upcoming book project that we've got coming out.
Sure. Yeah. So we're December, we're launching Faces of Grief, and it's about 29 different authors telling their story of grief and loss. And it's not only death loss, which I love. It's other non-death related losses. So
Yeah,
I talk about the loss of my sister, and you talk about the loss of
yeah.
Craig, and
But
there's
there's been like somebody
divorce.
talks about like incarceration, like losing a
Mhm.
relationship because somebody got incarcerated. There's
Yep.
the grief of your child having developmental disabilities and not being the
Yeah.
person you thought they would be or could be or should be. So yeah, so it's going to be a really great reading experience for everyone where we'll be able to just kind of open the door on the conversation of grief and the death
Yeah.
experience. Why did you pick this project to get involved in?
So I have been working on trying to tell my story in many different ways. Being on podcasts like this is one of them. I've been doing some speaking gigs, and the opportunity came up, and I'm like, I need to tell my story
Mm,
because when I was approached with the project, there were no bereaved siblings involved in the project. And we usually unfortunately, I feel we get overlooked sometimes because
mm,
they think that, because we get the messages of you have to be strong for your parents, and there's a lot of different conditioning that we go through as bereaved siblings that it kind of invalidates our grief. And so, because I've been working on uh, validating my own grief by telling my story, that I was like, oh, this is just another way to tell my story.
I love that. Yeah, and I think I struggled with the telling of my story because in my business and in building my brand, I very clearly wanted to establish myself as more than just the widow on a soapbox, right? And
Yeah.
so this was an experience for me to kind of force myself to share a little bit more about the experience, to kind of,
Hmm.
I wrote a blog early on about what happened. And then I think I post on my website about like the story of his passing and that because it was quite traumatic. But this was a different methodology, a different modality for me to process some of that own emotional stuff. So it's
Yeah.
been quite powerful and it's been
Yeah.
kind of a long game, but we're at the end of the project. So
Yeah.
December we'll be able
It,
to have that out in the world. And in the show notes, I will definitely include a pre-order link. I know you and I both have one. So
good.
as we share this out to our respective communities, we'll be able to follow along with that. What else
Yeah.
do you have going on for projects as we close out 2024? Anything big coming up for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'm sort of working on right now. They're not like, so I told you about the group class, the 6 week, getting through the holidays. I'm going to be spending the next couple of days kind of getting that information together. I'm also in the process of planning um, another group, like a membership type of program where people could come in and have a monthly membership fee and have group sessions with some additional content, Q&As, those kinds of things. So
Love that.
that's what it's just still percolating. I don't have the full
The
details on
brainchild.
that
Yeah.
yet. Yeah, but I
Well,
know
keep
it's
us
the next.
posted.
I
Absolutely.
know it's
Would
the
love
next
more
step in my
details on that.
progression. Yeah, and also at the end of October, we're doing our juice cleanse. And anyone is available, if anyone that wants to come and try. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I can definitely answer questions. It's a really great way of really not just resetting your digestive system, but your psychological connection to food. And that's the thing that I always get out of it because we need a reset every 6 months. Like
Totally.
some people say every quarter, but I think for me, every 6 months is feels comfortable because then, I get a chance to live a little bit. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a
You
big
can't just
fan
like
of like.
work to pay bills, so to speak, you know?
Right, right. Well, or even restrict all the foods and all the things, and then I
Yeah,
get resentful. And so I know that about myself. So every 6 months is a good time to reset. And so we do it right around October-ish, right before the holidays, and then like the around in the spring again. So that
I
we
love
kind
that.
of,
I might have to
yep.
jump on that train in the spring because
Well, and the
it's
thing is
hard to,
if
holiday is
it,
my birthday.
yeah.
I make that excuse for like we're not gonna skip cake this month.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Well,
Like
no, but I'm in that same thing where it's the holidays are coming up, but when you reset your nervous system that and your digestive system, you don't need as much to feel
mm,
satiated, right? Like so like that was my thought. I was like, "Oh, I'll just let myself gain the 10 pounds from Halloween through New Year's and then I'll lose it come January." But ever since I've been cleansing right before the holidays, I realized that, oh, I could have one piece of cake rather than six. So, right.
oh,
So
interesting.
just a little thought,
Hey, I like that. That's some good
right.
advice. And we'll talk more about that.
Well,
Um,
because what it does is it reduces your like connection to like
mm.
sugar and sweets and all
Well, and
that kind
also
of
like they
stuff.
say when you fast, it actually shrinks the size of your stomach and there's
Yep.
tons of science behind it. So, but I
100,
love
right.
that.
And yeah.
I
So
love it. And also, the end of October, we have another opportunity to promote the Faces of Grief. We're going to be on an
yes.
Open to Hope interview. Tell me a little bit more about that and how listeners can find that if they want to watch the interview.
Yeah, so if anyone that's not familiar with Open to Hope, it's a great organization that provides a lot of grief education and grief resources. You can go to, I think it's opentohope.com. I'll get you the exact URL. I've done a bunch of they have a blog, a podcast and an internet television show where they talk about all different types of grief.
Mm,
They have a huge library of videos that you can watch with interviews and different things like that. So it's a fantastic opportunity to learn. So go to Open to Hope and you'll get a ton of content that's just remarkable.
I love that. Well, we are at the end of our time together, Jason. Thank you so much for such an incredible conversation. Where can the listeners find you if they want to learn more about you and the things that you do and see if they can get
Yep.
in touch with you?
So the easiest way is going to my website is www.somaticgrieftherapy.com. I have a lot of great free content on there. So if you want to see my keynote, you can easily hop on there and download that video. I have my slide deck too, all accessible through that.
Wow.
I have an ebook, a free ebook using essential oils in grief that kind of talk about the supplementation and different
Ooh,
things that you can do, different strategies you can use.
I'll link that right
And
to my website too. So for people looking for it, I'll put that right on the resources tab.
That's awesome. And then and I also there was another I have my pre-sale link to to Faces of Grief, and you can connect with me on social. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So I do these I try to do a few times a week. I'll do like these inspirational 1 minute inspirational videos, just to remind people, because the two we always immerse ourselves in learning, but then it's the repetition, those daily things that we do every single day. Those are just as critical. The habits, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can teach me to do TikTok, because I'm not tech savvy, and I asked my 15-year-old, I said, "Hey, can you teach me how to do the TikTok?" And he said, "Mom,
Yeah.
step number one, don't call it the TikTok."
The TikTok, yeah.
Maybe you can take it from there, because he's less than thrilled. But
yeah, I keep it simple. I do all of my videos in one take, right?
I love that.
And I just literally I video it from my camera. I hit start and I hit stop, and because I want to be as transparent as possible. So all of my ums and uhs and e's, like
Totally.
they all kind of get put in there. So
I love it. Well,
awesome.
this is it for A Happily Never After. I'm your host, Kate Mollison. Until next time, with grief and gratitude, stay well.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.